progress.
Hello, aloha, we're here. God bless you. We have a start with a roll call. Please.
Thank you, Chair Davis.
Oh, before you do it, speak right into the mic because we do have people online. So if you could speak directly into the mic, it would really help. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Chair Davis. I just wanted to quickly announce on staff side, we have Mr. Bolton with me here today. And then we also have Mr. Banks, who's sitting in the back, is in for Greta Walters is normally staffing this committee. So really happy to have Ryan with us today. I'll take roll call for all of us. So Dave Davis, Ken Saxon, Diane Black, Hillary Blackerby, here. Roxana Bonderson.
Here. Here.
Roger Durling, Nadra Ehrman, Robin Elander, Ed Lenvik,
here.
Peter Lewis,
Here.
Kristen Miller,
Here.
Suzanne Tejada,
Here.
Alejandra Gutierrez, not present, Megan Harmon, Mike Jordan, Michael Becker, not present, and Marge Caffarelli, not present.
Great. We do have a quorum, and Jack Harmon is here to catch us up on anything that we need to be caught up on. Takes us to announce opening remarks and announcements. Beth, I'm going to ask you to open that with anything that you want to talk about today. I know a lot's been going on, what staff's been doing, what you've been doing. Give us a brief update.
Great, thank you, Chair Davis. So I'm going to just go through some of the high-level things that staff's been doing sort of behind the scenes over the last couple months. Just to make this committee aware, along with the MIG team and their sub-consultants that we have with us here today, Strategic Economics. So the team has done approximately 15 one-on-one property and business owner interviews, in addition to 3 group meetings with businesses and property owners, along with a meeting with Visit Santa Barbara and their TBID committee. Approximately about 15 to 20 staff interviews, about 12 other interviews that include members from different city groups like City Council, Planning Commission, Historic Landmarks Commission, and other representatives. And we've had about 43 individual interviews and then about 45 members that had participated in some group meetings. So that's just to start us out. And both the MIG team and the Strategic Economics team will talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We also had a joint Historic Landmarks Commission and Planning Commission meeting on October 14th. I thought it went really well. We talked about sort of the visioning. We had a detailed conversation, somewhat similar to what we did with the State Street Advisory Committee back in August with that group. So was really pleased with that. And we look forward to being in front of both of those bodies in the near future. We also kicked off a new website. So if you'll hear about it later in this meeting, but there is a new website for the project. We are also going to talk about it in a little bit, but a community survey will be launching next week as well. We have branding for this project, so new branding that you'll see today. Strategic Economics has been looking at a lot of the sales tax data for our community, so we did take that to council and get that approved so that they could really dive into the data on that. Staff did a Presidio neighborhood walking tour with the Historic Trust for Preservation. I highly recommend, if anybody is interested, to get in touch with Ann Peterson and see if she can get you on a walk like that. It was really, really eye-opening and learned a lot. Working on some activation events on State Street with various city organizations, including the Library and Public Works and others. And then I had a discussion with the sign committee on some signage issues on State Street. And then I attended the American Planning Association conference earlier this month in Southern California and led a panel with some other cities on the future of downtowns in response to both COVID and then afterwards. So we had, along with the city of Santa Barbara, the city of Laguna Beach, the city of Mountain View, the city of Palo Alto, the city of San Francisco, and the city of San Diego participated in that. I'm in really close communication with them as well as other cities throughout the state. Learned a lot, and it was just a great opportunity to kind of talk about lessons learned from all of those communities on both during the closure of COVID and then what different cities are doing in the longer term future. Just as a quick note there, I really think we are at, everybody hears it, but we are at an exciting point, and a lot of communities have done a closure during COVID and are thinking about the interim strategy for what that means and what outdoor dining means. Not a lot of communities that I've come across are really thinking much beyond that just yet. And so to be thinking more holistically about what our downtown will be in the future and who it can serve, I think that is exciting. It was cool to see the city of Palo Alto. They have 2 closures in their downtown area. One is much smaller than the other. But they're looking at doing a master plan process as well, have very similar, they look very, very similar to the city of Santa Barbara's key elements for what they envision they're going to start kicking off in that process. So we'll see that soon. And then you'll hear a little bit later, but with some of the events coming up that we'll talk about, we're starting to do some advertisements and try to get the word out to the community. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in this meeting as well. And I'm sure I missed something, but that's just a quick update.
I think you did miss it. We talked about sending out the PowerPoints of these other cities to everybody,
Yes.
so you can see what's happening around the state and they'd be informative.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Yes, so I will send out the PowerPoint that we used during the conference with the other cities. And I'm happy to chat offline with anybody that wants to hear more about what each of the individual cities are doing. Just in the interest of time, I won't go into full detail right now, but there's some interesting things going on both in those communities. I've also been in close contact with the director for the Community Vitality Department at the City of Boulder. They are the ones that manage the Pearl Street area for the city. So I've been learning a lot from him and then other communities as well throughout California.
Thank you. I have a short announcement. I say short because I think we may have some discussion. During the interim period, I was asked by a number of you 2 similar questions. One is, when is the SSAC going to really get into looking at alternatives and delve into some of the issues and have the ability to weigh in on some of these issues? Ed Lenvik, for one, I know sent me that, but others asked the same similar type of question. I think, Tess, when we go through agenda review and we get into the meat of the main item here on the summary of the existing condition, now we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to push that one off into the main discussion. But I did hear you, and let's talk about that a little bit in the body of the staff report. Second question, when at the HLC Planning Commission meeting, those of you who are either there or watch it on TV, I was asked a question. I went to the meeting. I'm going to sit in the back of the room and listen. That's all I'm doing. I got asked a question. And the question was, what are you concerned about in your process going forward for the next 1.5 years or 2 years? And I have a longer answer about big things, but the one focus people don't understand interim operations, short-term versus long-term visioning, and the State Street Advisory Committee. We're all State Street. And everywhere I go, what are you doing with those green bike lanes? Why aren't you basically dealing with the park? We hear that all the time, right? And I think internally, we've even had some problems in communication, basically staying on top of the community perception in that regard. Totally get it, okay? One thing I would like to ask, and then also hear comments from the board, I'd like to ask that staff, Brian and his staff, Sarah, they could come for 5 minutes at the beginning of each of our meetings, give us an update of not just what's going on, but what's coming up, kind of like a status report. And when there are issues like the taking off the green lanes, you send that over to Tess and Timmy, let them make a determination whether it needs to be distributed to us just for information, so that when I go buy that bottle of wine on Friday night and they ask me what the hell's going on with the bike lanes, I can say, inner operations. No. But the communication's really important. And this last one, I totally get how and why we got to where we were, but it also is an indicator going forward, keeping those lines of communication open. And those 2 steps, informing our staff, let them make the decision whether we need to know. And also you coming to the meeting for 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning, I expanded it to 10, to see what's going on in that regard. So I'll open that up for discussion. Michael. Yeah.
Guilty as charged. I've already asked staff this too, but I haven't gotten a reply back too, but it shouldn't just be one-way communication, because it's painfully obvious to me that even once you do something, and even if you communicated it, I don't really know that we have a really good way to hear back on responses too. And I don't know if that's the big committee, the small committee, staff, but it should all funnel to the same place right now. So just as an example, the removal of the green bike lanes is just who can yell loudest at a council member on their opinion of that's either good or bad. I don't see yet a structured manner when we take little steps or even responses from this type of meeting, how people out in the public hear or see that and then are able to provide input back, and we're tracking that input for the short picture or the long picture.
Good comment, Michael. Thank you. Hillary.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And of course, these comments are just me as an individual, but we've had a really good/bad example of how this could really go sideways last week with the bike lanes. I woke up on Tuesday, I read the City News in Brief. The top story was green bike lanes are going away tomorrow. Sorry, no explanation why. Surprise to me that a safety measure was being removed from State Street without any public anything. And then ran into a ton of people blowing me up, which is fine. What's going on with that? What's going on with that? I don't know. It's news to me. It's a surprise to me. It's pretty terrible as far as I'm concerned. People, like Chair said, people don't differentiate. No. It's about State Street. We had a Transportation Circulation Committee meeting last month, I think. The committee members there, who were pretty plugged in, were like, I don't get it. Why is all this stuff happening? This interim stuff, it's not related to you doing any public outreach or whatever. Councilmember Jordan makes a great point. Yeah, they could send a notice out or let us know what's happening. But if the public doesn't have a way to weigh in or to at least give feedback or to know who's making those decisions, and it was very clear that the normal process was not followed. If this is how we're going to do it, we are going to fail. We're set up to fail. Because if the public doesn't trust us or city staff, who I know are doing really hard work in public works and in community development, no one's going to trust us, no one's going to participate, and we're going to be in trouble. If these things just ad hoc, not even the ad hoc, because I know there were council members that didn't even know about the lanes being removed. So just, I really want us to make sure, and for city leadership to make sure that we're really doing this in an honest way, and it's not just whoever yells loudest. If other people knew they could yell loud and have things done outside the process, they probably would. So I'm worried, but I think we can probably turn it around. But I just wanted to voice that. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Just editorial comment, and I'll close all comment. I'll get the last word. Yes and no. Communication to the public and to this committee, it's important so people know what's happening and why. What I know, I hate to say this, but in terms of traffic control measures, right? Staff is empowered to do traffic control measures for safety and whatever, and they don't have to notice anybody. They can just do it. What I'm saying is we're in the middle of this public process where people are watching what's going on, and they're confused as to, is this a traffic control measure? Is this a policy change? Is this something that the State Street is now looking at no bikes on State Street in the future? And this is the first step. The communication of what's going to happen, why it's happening, and how it fits into the whole. And it doesn't have to be a big deal, and it's not a public process. It's just information so that people know what's happening. So again, some brief to our staff so that we can distribute to at least to the committee. So we as ambassadors, if nothing else, have talking points as to what's happening, and having staff, their interim operations staff, come to us at our meeting and give us a briefing as to what's been happening, what are they hearing, and what's coming up would be fantastic. Okay.
We do have Roxana.
Go ahead, Roxana.
Online. Hand raised.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Tess. I just wanted to let you all know, very similar to our chair, after our PC HLC joint hearing, I received a lot of feedback as well. And I don't need to repeat what you have said. I just wanted to add that confusion goes quite further not just about bike lanes or, a list of things that we could add, but ultimately there's a general misunderstanding from the public about what is happening behind the scenes, what is happening in preparation to the bigger plan. And I think that as we have these hearings, perhaps it could be an opportunity for us to present sort of updates. I mean, we're already doing that, but to really clarify that, we've heard some of the comments, and in the meantime, we're doing X, Y, and Z. A lot of it has to do with immediate attention to things like vagrancy, cleanliness, safety, obviously bike lane issues, homelessness issues, and parklets, of course. But if we have these updates as they're progressing, even though they are sort of the prelude to the bigger picture of our master plan, I think it would be wonderful to continue to share those updates. And even between our meetings, our monthly meetings, I want to commend Tess for a lot of her emails in the past few weeks. We've been getting a lot of updates. I don't know if everyone reads it, but if we can continue to have that type of regular feedback and information from Tess, and if it can include some of those updates as they come, then we as the liaisons to our public members, we can actually share what we know, and hopefully it'll be accurate and fair information. So I just wanted to echo, Hillary Blackerby, she just said some really important things. I feel exactly the same way. And so the more we know in the meantime, the more we can share appropriate, correct information, and the more that the public will be in tune with what's going on. I think that'll be wonderful. I think we're moving in the right direction. And thank you. A big shout out to Tess. Keep those emails coming.
Good. Thank you, Roxana. I am going to move on to the next item. That is agenda review. Tess, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this because we took some time here. You have on here a summary of stakeholder engagement, emerging existing conditions analysis. But we're gonna talk about State Street planning process update, project goals, et cetera, emerging existing conditions from economics, circulation, urban design, and infrastructure, the upcoming community engagement outreach, the Visioning Windows 1 on November 3rd and 4th, and then what's happening in December, as well as the survey, which is big, and then next steps. So that's kind of the general content of what we're going to be dealing with today, and then we'll talk about meeting schedule at the end. So with that, I'll go quickly to approval of the minutes from the August 15th meeting. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes. I got a motion from Roger. I got a second from Kristen. Roll call, please. Start from the bottom and up.
Mike Jordan, Megan Harmon, Alejandra Gutierrez is not present. Ed Lenvik.
Yeah, yes.
Roxana Bonderson,
Yes.
Marge Caffarelli is not present. Michael Becker is not present. Suzanne Tejada.
Yes.
Kristen Miller, Peter Lewis,
Yes.
Robin Elander, Nadra Ehrman,
Yes.
Roger Durling, Hillary Blackerby,
Yes.
Diane Black, Ken Saxon,
Yes.
and Dave Davis.
Yes, minutes are approved with 2 absences. And that will then take us to general public comment.
So just before we jump into general public comment, we did receive 3 written comments that were distributed prior to the hearing. I also have 1 speaker slip for an item that is not on the agenda. If any other members of the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, there are blue slips down there.
Not on the agenda, but within our purview.
Correct, within the State Street Advisory Committee's purview. So I have 1 member of the public here, and then we'll go to virtual. Barry Remis.
Good afternoon, Chair Davis and committee members. So my name is Barry Remis, and I'm representing Move Santa Barbara County, which is formerly SB Bike Plus Coast. And without repeating some of the other comments that were mentioned earlier, what I would like to call your attention to, for your August 15th meeting, you did receive several written public comments in support of the importance, the value, and the, the economic value and contribution of bicycling on State Street or other wheeled items, objects, wheeled transportation methods. And while we do see, of course, that there is a separation in a purview separation in the State Street Advisory Committee and staff in terms of traffic and management, you do see that obviously you have value, your input matters. And so as the process continues, as you continue to investigate and analyze and evaluate, please keep in mind what we would be losing if we were to go down an avenue that did not encourage or allow all forms of movement, of people movement along State Street, not just in the promenade area, but the multimodal aspect of it. If we're trying to revitalize, if we're trying to develop and form a new sense of community, a new sense of place, including housing, including places to be and to live, our living room, as it were, just think about not being able to get on a bike and ride it throughout the city. We know that bikes equal business. It's been shown, it's been proven that economic development is there, economic vitality is there with allowing wheeled modes of transportation. And yes, we need to address the speed of e-bikes. We need to make that harmony happen, but you can send a message to city administrators that it's important to keep bikes on State Street for the interim and the long term. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And congratulations on your merger. Okay,
Chair, it looks like we have no members online.
Okay.
We can move forward.
good. We will close general public comment, move on to agenda items. Our first substantive item on our agenda, summary of stakeholder engagement and emerging existing conditions analysis for the State Street Master Plan.
Okay, very good.
Daniel.
Once again,
Good afternoon.
good afternoon. I'm Daniel Isofano, principal with MIG. Glad to see everybody. And we're anxious to share a lot of information that we've been gathering and assembling and analyzing over the last several weeks. Our staff have been busy. We also have Dina Belzer here from Strategic Economics to do part of the presentation. We have a long-time partnership with Dina and her firm, and we're really pleased to have her involved with us on this important assignment. So I just want to introduce Mukul Malhotra, our principal in charge of the work that you're going to see here. I did want to say we have a lot of material to go through. We're going to put that out there. It is part one of a two-part summary of existing conditions. And it's not recommendations at this point. It's information on which to build a vision and future set of options and considerations for the long-term future of State Street. And so we will pause at the end of each major topic area for committee feedback and questions, and we'll try to move that along as best we can. But as I said, just be aware there's a lot to cover so that we all have an equal starting point as we approach the future of State Street.
Good, Dan. Thank you, because I was going to ask the question about stopping for questions. And rather than just look for questions, I'm actually going to go round table, go around the room and ask you if you have any comments or questions. Quickly, though, given the time constraints, but I'm actually going to call on each of you. And you can just simply say pass or no comment, no questions. Go ahead. Danny.
Absolutely. Okay. So with that in mind, you have seen the outline of the topics. We're going to get right into it. And so Mukul Malhotra, take it away.
Thanks, Daniel. So starting with the project update, the first thing, you're going to see a lot of these maps. This is to orient all of us on our project area map, which basically goes from the 101 to right up to Sola Street. And then we have Anacapa on top, Chapala in the bottom, and then of course, State right in the middle. And we usually put the numbered blocks going from 300 to 1300. I do want to mention, also joining us virtually is Mr. Miguel Nunes from Fair and Peers, who is our transportation multimodal mobility lead. And I will be presenting some of the emerging multimodal mobility analysis, but he will be there to answer any questions too. So very briefly, just to affirm what we have always heard from the City Council as well from the SSAC with regards to the overarching street visioning principles. There's a great need to revitalize the downtown, create a safe experience for all users, ensure economic revitalization, have to be people-centric, facilitate housing in downtown, and then, of course, recapture, reestablish downtown's identity to bring people downtown and design it for locals. This is the roadmap that we shared with you all last time. We are at our second SSAC meeting. Keep in mind, we have 7 more to go so as to review all key milestones as we are delivering emerging concepts, refining concepts, hearing at all key points what the community is saying to different ideas and concepts. We will be coming back to you all to have a robust discussion at all key points. And then, of course, as we are thinking of prioritization, implementation, all of that will be discussed all along the project, hoping really to end it by early 2024, if not earlier. So starting with the stakeholder and the community feedback summary, Tess gave a great number of meetings. I lost count how many we did, honestly, but it was a lot of great feedback that we heard from the commission, the city staff, council members, different organization, property and business owners. I'm going to start with all the meetings I was in, but we also have Dina, who's going to present more information that she heard when she did her one-on-one or meetings with business and property owners. And we will be integrating all that feedback in throughout our presentation to tell not just what we are seeing based on our existing condition analysis, but also how it relates to the feedback that we are hearing from the community as well from the stakeholders. So if you all remember, in late October, when we met first time, we asked you what's working, not working, what do you like, dislike, hopes for the future, one thing you would love to accomplish, and then things we need to keep in mind in terms of effective community outreach and engagement strategies. We keep this overall structure for all our meetings, and then in some conversations, we dug deeper into some and less into others, but really try to keep into account what we all heard. This is just showing you what you all told us last time when we did, and this builds or became the foundation of what we heard from the other community members and stakeholders. So let's start with what were the strengths? What did people tell us? What's working? What do they like? Number one, the thing that rose to the top, people said again and again, was the character. There is a beautiful, distinct character based on the historic character, but all the stories, the overall architecture of State Street and the zero blocks, it really makes it a very special place. It's got a great physical setting. Dave, you already talked about how beautiful it is, but the outside, but the big point is it's most of the time it's beautiful outside, and that's a unique asset in some way that people mentioned that should be celebrated in terms of maximizing experiential uses in an outdoor environment, which then complement all the buildings and internal uses that are happening. People talked about outdoor dining. A lot of people said street closure was something that was working. I'll go to the other side of the coin in a minute, but a lot of people said they have not seen so many locals on State Street since the closure. And that is something to be celebrated. All future improvements should build on the fact that more local people come to this area. We still need the tourists. We still need all other users of the street, but the locals and the local residents are really important. People were also not at all shy in telling what was not working on the street. And we like that. And even though the conversation was, we wanted them to think about the long-term vision, it's a long-term master plan, people are reacting for no fault into the immediate context. And so the number one concern, the feeling, or whether it's real or perceived, of feeling unsafe, cleanliness, vacancies and absentee property owners. We heard a lot of discussion from you all, but also in other forums and from individuals about the parcel sizes and configurations and how it is difficult to do development. There was a lot of feedback, and Dina's going to talk more about it in terms of regulatory and development limitations. And there was a lot of feedback we heard in all different forums about, hey, maybe the 1300 block or the 500 block is working, but the middle blocks seem to be inactive. And we'll begin to show that how it actually works in our existing condition analysis that we have started to work on. And then people said, street closure, maybe that's a concern too. Maybe it's too long. Maybe it should be less than what we have right now. So there was a lot of good and bad feedback, what we got. Hopes for the future, which builds on what you all told us also. What is the overall vision, long-term master plan vision? So number one, clearly we are hearing again and again, designed for the locals, residents, and tourists. But what I heard again and again, which is a very great foundation, they said, design it for families and children. And we heard it multiple times, is this needs to be the main street of not just downtown. It needs to be the main street for all the people of Santa Barbara, because a lot of people told us they do not consider State Street to be their main street. They consider their local neighborhood street to be their main street. So that's something they asked us to consider in terms of what they're hoping to see, how the master plan will try to achieve that. Integrating housing, attracting diverse users, institution, UC, other educational institutions. That was something that we heard. Removing barriers to new investment. And that is not just the regulatory framework, but we also heard in terms of, say, the stormwater requirements, that we have local standards, regional standards, as well as state mandates that we have to fulfill. And then program for a wide variety of activities, especially family-friendly activities, but they really wanted to see more happening in the middle of the street at different times of the day. On weekends, the activity should be different than what's happening during the week or the weeknight. And it should be multi-sensorial. There was a lot of feedback as the pianos were put. A lot of people told us it's so beautiful. It's changed the overall feel and what you're experiencing in downtown. And then even Dina is going to talk about what we heard. Is there an opportunity that all of the 11 blocks are not just one district, but it's broken up into maybe 3 districts, is an entertainment district or an arts district, so and so forth. So we would love to hear that feedback too. And then a flexible, experiential, world-class promenade. I think there is a desire that it should be a grand promenade, but what does it actually entail physically and how is it programmed? That's something to be discussed. In terms of overall engagement and outreach, we heard what you all told us also was to be inclusive, go to people, don't expect just people to come to you. And we specifically heard that we need to reach out to people, not just in downtown, but non-downtown neighborhoods, people who usually do not come to downtown and people who are not usually engaged. All our events are going to be bilingual as we start our future visioning, as Tess alluded to in the first week of November, and then work with local organizations, CBOs, groups, neighborhood groups, so on and so forth, and go to the events where the neighbors are coming, where the locals are coming. So we are again going to folks as opposed to expect them to come to us. So Daniel, before we go in.
Yeah, just real quickly, any surprises? Are you hearing resonant themes? Any feedback? Just initial reactions on what we heard from that round of outreach. Again, that is only the tip of the iceberg, because as we've said, there's going to be a much more expansive outreach here starting up very soon.
Of the multisensory experience, having the different zones, and then we talked a lot about art. I didn't necessarily see that in the feedback, but that could be enveloped within the experimental district. So.
Very good, excellent. Ed, anything to add? Okay.
Robin.
Okay, that's good. Diane, or
interested in hearing more about how we're going to outreach to people who don't normally come to State Street, because I think that's a really important
Right.
group.
And that's on the agenda for today as well.
Ken?
Yeah, at some point, I'd be interested in hearing more from your all's experience about what that might mean to be like the main street of a region, and how that distinguishes from other kinds of main streets in an area.
Right, excellent. We will have some of that today, but we'll be expanding on that going forward.
Yeah. Nothing surprised me by your observations.
Okay,
Those are thematic themes.
yeah,
Long time.
very broad
Suzanne.
themes. Suzanne?
Yes, I don't have any disagreements with what you said, but I just had a question. I think it's important that we really define how we describe the street, because you use the word promenade. And I think people are confused. Maybe I'm confused. What is a promenade? And is this really a promenade? So I think we're using words interchangeably. We're talking about Main Street, we're talking about promenade. So it's confusing. And I really think we need to define it.
Yeah, and people say a lot of things when we talk to them, and some of the times that's what comes to mind. Yes, Hillary? Okay,
I thought it was
Kristen.
spot on.
okay. Mike, anything? Any reaction? Sorry,
Just,
got your mic here.
Hopefully, we're continuing to remember that we have two parallel projects going on along with the entire work project, and that's the underpass. We're about to spend a whole bunch of money on the underpass, and that should be a nexus and consideration within what we're doing on the next 13 blocks. And then the same on that first block off in the 700 block of De La Guerra Plaza. We're getting lined up there to spend a whole bunch of money there too. And they will all interconnect and affect each other. So we shouldn't lose sight of those because they're moving along on separate tracks in this.
Yeah, absolutely. More communication issues to keep untangled and in front of the public, that's for sure. Okay, well, with that, we are going to go on to the existing
Sorry,
conditions
Dave.
analysis. Oh, anybody else? Sorry.
One more.
They dropped
Sorry,
you
you
off
guys.
they dropped you off the screen. I forgot. Sorry.
I know it's really hard to be up in the sky here. I just wanted to comment quickly that, as a planner, I practice planning, and I recognize often that I am speaking sort of at the bird's eye view. I can see the end way before the beginning has started, but most people don't think that way. And I recognize that often when I personally speak about State Street and downtown. And I think that somebody else, I believe it was Ms. Takeda, mentioned that we have to be careful about our language. And I think that that's a really, really good piece of advice, that we help people not only understand the big picture to the best of our ability, but really help them understand that there are immediate things that are happening as we work towards whatever it might be. If it's a promenade, what does that mean? I just want to really emphasize that, because I catch myself losing the listener often when I am speaking too big and too far in the future. That's all I wanted to add. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good advice. Thank you very
Go ahead,
much.
Daniel.
Okay, we are going to move forward here. I will add to that. Go ahead. McCool.
Thanks, Daniel. So in terms of our emerging existing condition analysis, and I do want to put a caveat, all the mapping you'll see, it's work in progress. I have to be honest, every time I go to the street, there's a new vacancy, but a vacant shop has a use in it. So things are always changing. It's the beauty of the dynamic street that we have. But as we are looking at our existing condition analysis, there are things we are looking at the regional, larger picture level, and Dina's going to talk more about that in the economic analysis. But we're also going to look at it from the larger adjoining context, for example, when we are thinking of transit and bike connectivity, and then obviously focus on the study area for the most part of emerging condition analysis, because that's the core project area. And with that, I'm going to request Dina to share the economic analysis.
Thank you, McCall. I feel like Joe Biden every time he comes to the podium, he takes off his mask. The new sensation for me. I want to be very clear that this data is very preliminary.
And we've spent some time working on the data just to give ourselves a normative sense of what's going on, but we're not trying to be reductive here. So please take what we're doing as an opening shot. We spent the last couple of days walking and talking the street with various property owners and stakeholders, and we have also spoken to several of you on the committee, and we'll be cycling all that back. So if you don't see data that you expect to see, please let us know what you think might be helpful, or where you think we could be more nuanced. This is a very complicated, Danielle and I were talking about this earlier, there's a very complicated context. This is probably the most complicated place I've worked in a long career. So that makes it really fun and interesting, but I also want to really acknowledge from the start that we're not here to try to simplify everything down at the beginning. Okay, so when we think about the regional context for State Street, one of the things we like to do is begin to think about it in the context of markets, real estate markets, the retail industry, because at one point State Street was sort of the main street of Santa Barbara. And I'm sorry, this map is a little hard to read. The gray color dot there, that is State Street. Is there a pointer on this? There it is. Right here is in gray. It's one of the oldest retail districts in this larger region. And then the different colored dots show the decades in which more retail has been added. So what you see here is that the Central Coast has grown population-wise, and that the retail industry has really followed that growth in rooftops. So Santa Barbara itself has not necessarily been the fastest growing place. And so you're not seeing the Costco's coming here to your downtown, partly because your downtown couldn't accommodate that. But people like to shop at Costco, myself included, right? So different places begin to serve different functions over time, both in response to the retail industry, and then to the development community that is responding to the retail industry. And I think it's important to be clear that retailers, Macy's, is not the Paseo Nuevo's developer. And they have two different sets of goals and objectives, two different sets of market forces that are affecting the decisions they're making. So we're trying to sort of capture all those concepts in this very simple slide. So you'll be getting a copy of this presentation later, and you'll be able to study these colors and what they mean. We also want to look very closely at the office market. One of the things that we've learned particularly in the last day or so, is that while the office is not a predominant use on State Street, and it is the use that is the most challenging in some ways because of the pandemic, office workers provide an important sort of safety net for many of the businesses that are on State Street. We worked on a project in a much smaller community earlier this year and learned that the office users in that community contribute about 10% of the total business for downtown businesses, but it provides the opportunity for those businesses to remain open for breakfast and lunch during the week. And then they do their big dollars at night and on the weekends when they're tourists in town. So it's very similar in some ways, much smaller place, also in California. So we want to really understand what that function is. So if we start to talk about office uses, it's not necessarily because we think suddenly State Street is going to be fixed by having more office here, but we want to also acknowledge that sort of the undermining of that use has its problems for the other uses. So we want to see this in a important way. So again, we know that a lot of the office competition is coming from GLIDA. I would think of this as a partnership more, and this is a little bit what we talked about, where State Street is the place where you can potentially incubate a business, or where you can use State Street as a location to draw certain kinds of employers. But if you're a startup on State Street, you may need to go to GLIDA as a next step because they have bigger floor plate buildings there. So these things are, you have to see these office in particular as part of an ecosystem. And again, really to understand these uses, because the office is a local use, right? And those are local users. It's not a tourist user. So when we talk about locals, that's an important component of this. In terms of the real estate market conditions, and this is where I want to be clear that some of this is potentially reductive, we use CoStar, which is a national real estate database, and it's not perfect. But what we saw in CoStar is that there are about 214 real estate properties, but then the Radius company, if you all don't know Justin Diem, he's awesome, and he has been inventorying vacancies on State Street for several years. That data is posted on the Radius website, and it's a really great way to understand the dynamism of the street. So we're using both the CoStar data and the Radius data. Retail is a very significant portion of the land use there. But it's also really interesting that with Macy's and Nordstrom's, both of which closed before the pandemic, it just in sheer square footage, those two store closures alone count for almost 80% of the total vacancy. And you can see on this chart here, this is where the vacancies spike up. And then you see they start to drop off. This shows a little peak here. This chart is based on the CoStar data, but according to Justin's data, the retail vacancies on State Street are now back down to where they were in 2018. So important to keep that in mind, that again, this is a very much a moving target. And also State Street was commanding sort of top of the market rents for retail. And again, sort of in 2016, maybe 2017, but those rents were already declining prior to COVID. And now they've come down to sort of match the rate for Santa Barbara as a whole. And this is both an opportunity and a challenge. It's a challenge for the property owners, but it's an opportunity for some of the potential tenants. In terms of the keeping going, there's been a lot of discussion about Santa Barbara being over-retailed. And many of you who've seen these numbers about retail per capita, they're generally based, or per person, they're generally based on shopping center numbers, shopping center per capita. This is total retail. This is everything, the junk, the shopping centers, everything. And so for the region, and this is the region that we just showed you, whoops, sorry. It's about 4 square feet per person. And for Santa Barbara, it's about 6. So you're a little high. So maybe you can use some pruning. That's some of that may be other places in the city, but it's something to keep in mind. And generally, we can talk another time about sort of the trend in the retail industry nationally, what's going on there, how does the opportunity at State Street mesh with what these national terms are, but mostly we know that we're looking at a desire for more mixed use space. And I would say more a mix of uses. Sometimes we get too fixated on mixed vertical or mixed use in one building, but we want to be sure that we've got a good mix. The food and beverage focus, you guys really kind of have that nailed, having eaten several meals now on State Street, I would say, really great. But then this experiential uses, so this look and feel of the place, and the value of State Street itself becomes an anchor. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember when we talked about anchor tenants. And now we're talking about place as an anchor tenant. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Again, in terms of the office, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the office market is very challenging. If in the best of times, people would like to have the be on State Street, and you can see that the office. Oh, sorry, I keep missing the rents for State Street tend to be higher than for the city. This is Goleta on this number here. Again, this is based on CoStar data, so this is national normative data. So you can contradict me if you don't think this is absolutely correct. But it does show that people do consider State Street to be a premium office location. And then finally, one of the things that we have heard in terms of analyzing the retail trends on State Street is that this is not just about State Street, but it's also about Anacapa and Chalupa and the cross streets and the ways in which they interact with each other. Chapala, sorry. Chalupa is about Taco Bell, right? I know, I've seen too many Taco Bell ads, right? Sorry, Chapala, I knew that. So we have data, as somebody said earlier, we've been given confidential data from the city where we can begin to really slice and dice the sales by store type, by location. And we're hoping to do more of that, again, to get a more nuanced idea of what is going on. But we do know that there is concern from some of the businesses that are on the cross streets, and is there going to be hollowing out, et cetera. So we want to be able to sort of speak more knowledgeably about that. Just to try to wrap up on the data, the food service and drinking places, establishments, that's basically the food and beverage, have recovered in terms of their total sales. And we've just broken it down here. Let's see, this is sales tax collected in the study area. This has all been normalized. And this is the total, and let's see. And then we've got it broken down by geography. So again, I don't want to take a lot of time going through this data, but there has been since 2016 a total decline in the number of businesses in the area. So and restaurants generate the most revenue, followed by apparel stores. And again, walking up and down State Street, there are a lot of stores that sell clothing. Just one of the things that's sort of interesting about looking forward, and I don't want to really linger on this slide too long either, but the ownership patterns do matter. Who owns property has an impact on what happens in the future. There are a lot of properties that are owned. The blue color is family trusts. The blue color is not a single family trust, it's many family trusts, but it shows one of the challenges. Because families don't always see eye to eye. I don't know about your family, but that would be true in mine. So one of the things that we were asked to do was to take a look at what is the literature about small towns and economic health. And Santa Barbara is not really a small town like Nevada City, which is the place to which I was referring recently, but it's also not a big city. So we're trying to sort of walk that line here. We understand that, and a lot of this literature has been written in response to how our downtown's going to recover from COVID. And so one of the findings in the literature that we've been looking at is that it's important to have a variety of uses. And again, office seems problematic, and it also seems like something we'd want to stay away from because no one wants to come back to the office. But we also don't want to preclude that as a potential important piece of the mix. Places that capitalize on their unique and natural assets, this should be a no-brainer, and you guys are head of class on this one. And then again, public spaces that are really welcoming to everybody in the community, that diversity is really important, and it's becoming one of California's greatest strengths, and the cities that are doing the best in terms of kind of really reinventing themselves are really celebrating their diversity. Again, diverse spaces, really focusing on how to help to incubate some of these small businesses. And there's a lot to this too, which again, I don't really want to take up a lot of your time because I know that Danielle and McCool have a lot to go through. And then finally, we are tasked at some point to do case studies. So we asked people to whom we spoke what kinds of places they think would be interesting case studies. And these were places that people talked to us about. The Grove, that's, not really a main street. It's a mall, but whatever, right? It's important because it has really focused on the quality of place, right? So that's why it's good to think about. Charleston or Greenville, South Carolina are both very historic cities that are really seeing a huge bump in their tech activity. And in the kind of the big run up in the economy prior to COVID, Charleston was one of the fastest growing cities for young people in the country. And many of them were going there to take tech jobs. So, and they're drawn to Charleston. Why? Because it's an amazingly beautiful place, right? Greenville, the same thing. It's associated with Clemson University, and they have a whole technology cluster there around automotive engineering. Mountain View up in my neck of the woods in the Bay Area, San Luis Obispo, Bend, Oregon, Carmel, and Pearl Street. So again, we can talk about these more. And just finally, our takeaways, many of the stakeholders to whom we spoke have been here for a while. This is not their first rodeo in terms of sort of a downturn. And so people have a lot of good ideas about what needs to happen here, and that we need to, again, keep in mind this is a dynamic place. State Street has gone through these cycles before. There are fantastic opportunities for, again, experiential opportunity. Again, the experiential retail will amplify the quality of place. It's not a tension there. And then finally, the climate and the outdoor experience and the architecture all contribute. So this is very consistent with what you all heard from the community as well. So I'm going to stop there.
Very good. Okay, Dina, why don't you stay there in case there are follow-up questions? We'll do again around the horn, and we'll get to everybody. So if you want to use the Dave Davis method, any comments, reactions, questions, starting with Mike, we'll just go around the table, the alternative direction. All right.
Thank you.
Kristen? Microphone, sorry.
A little bit of a question about the competitive cities, San Luis Obispo, Santa Maria, Ventura, Goleta, Pocono Beach, I understand. Lompoc in the list, I'm just curious if the Solvang San Ynez Valley is not more of a competitor, but maybe
well, we were looking at them from the sort of retail evolution perspective in terms of who has more retail space. So I think you raise a really great point, and thank you for pointing that out. I think we asked the question, one of the questions that was asked of us early on was, have you seen other cities where they have seen this competition growing from malls and from other kinds of, call it modernizing retail? And so that's why we did what we did was to we looked at just shopping center space above 100,000 square feet. So Carpinteria is not on here either, et cetera. So we were just trying to, and this kind of speaks to that question of, is State Street a main street? You know, so that's it. And we had them all, what happened. So this is just, you know, it's just a contextual thing.
And can I ask one more question? When the statement of vacancies are back to 2018, is that without, if you take out the Macy's Nordstrom?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And then I just wanted to comment that I wrote down place is the new anchor tenant. That's cool.
Okay, good.
It's a good point. Thank you. Hillary, any comments, feedback? Suzanne?
No comments.
Peter?
Hi, so we had a nice visit today on.
Right, we're cheating because Peter and Tatum and I have spent a lot of time talking to each other.
Yeah, we spent a couple hours on State Street today, and one of the points you brought up was relative to the, are we over retailed? And we looked at the square footage per capita. I think one thing that would be really helpful for this city and for landlords in particular is to really dial down on that data as much as you can get. For instance, it would be great to really know what we'll do in dollars per square foot. So we already know we have too much square footage.
Right.
Now, the other thing that I've always found, but it's just my intuition, there's no data behind it. Our demographics, as I mentioned this morning, they mislead us. They look better than they are. So if we can find ways to know exactly what our true spending demographics are and what our potential that we're leaving on the table, I think it really helps people understand the essential challenge we have at retail.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Jen, you're next up.
Yeah, I had two things I'd like to know more about over time. One is I've heard very competing things about what's going on with your retail outside of food and beverage, and like Peter talked about the sales data. Like what's really happening?
Okay, yeah, we can definitely answer that question.
And the second is there wasn't anything in this about the impact, the relationship with the city's regulatory environment.
Right, yeah.
And that,
our feedback that we got on that was incorporated into what Nicole presented earlier, but yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We heard that one loud and clear.
Dave, do you get to comment here?
Sorry, I didn't let you finish your
A
sentence.
couple quick comments. Back in the day, our market included Thousand Oaks because because we had Nordstrom's, and Nordstrom's was a draw all the way from San Luis Obispo, right?
Interesting, right?
My comment is that times change, and you got to change with the times.
Right, exactly.
One thing which I never hear anybody really talk about, and It's a positive. And that is the city of Goleta grew into a real place. They have a Camino Real Center, Metropolitan Theaters were the newer theaters with much better facilities.
Right.
All the good restaurants downtown opened things out there. And that whole market, Kristen knows, basically, that regional market shifted in terms of the center of activity.
Right.
In downtown, times have changed. We
Right.
have to change with those times.
Right.
Which leads me also into the question of the office market. One, obviously, post-pandemic, what's coming back?
Right.
The rumor that the county might move out of the upper area, and that would potentially be like a neutron bomb to the restaurants in that particular area for the lunchtime crowd.
Wow.
So the change in the office market is something I want to drill down more on as to what's the future of that
Right.
in that regard.
Right.
Yeah, and if you can get the answer, that would be worth a lot of money.
Yeah, and again,
I have a bridge I want to sell you.
I'll second Peter's comment about the true demographics because
Right.
he and I have worked in this business for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I remember meeting with John Nordstrom, telling him, don't look at those numbers because they're not real.
Right.
But it's true.
Right.
When you look at the
Right.
numbers, we look much better
Right.
than what the reality is.
Right. Yeah.
Very interesting point. Yeah. Diane is next.
I found all the data pretty interesting, but one thing that you really didn't mention is housing and how housing sort of
Right.
influences. You talked about office
Right.
being an important
Great
component.
point.
It'd be
Yes.
nice to know how
Right.
housing
Yes.
factors in.
Yeah, that's a great point. We'll dive more into that as well.
Yeah. So this querying of Dina and her team, they'll be able to come back and probe these
Right.
Questions more. So we're getting a good list here. Roger?
Exactly. Yeah.
Hi there. I should disclose that I am not a retail person, nor do I shop. Um, my best friend from college is the CEO of a top luxury brand, and she was in town visiting, and she was very curious about downtown.
Right.
And her comments was that there is nothing interesting about the retail in Santa Barbara
Right.
downtown. She
Right.
says that, the Nordstroms and the Macy's are gone, but what's left even if they were in town, Nordstrom and Macy's, anywhere USA, she could
Go
find
to- right.
Nordstroms and Macy's.
Right.
She kept using this term saying curated retail.
Right. Mhm.
That
Mhm.
says that
Mhm. Right.
according to her, Santa Barbara needs
Right.
a
Right.
curated
Right.
retail
Right.
plan.
Right.
She she got a chance to go to Post Village in Tecito, and she said that's an example of a beautifully curated retail space, and that she wishes that.
Right. Right.
I wish I could paraphrase.
No,
what
I
she said,
understand what
but-
you're saying.
But
Yeah.
she's saying that
Yeah.
Santa Barbara deserves
Right.
a curated retail, a
Right.
thought through
Right.
to entice not just locals, but also
Right.
out-of-towners.
Right. Right. No, that's a great point and very challenging
Yeah.
where you have multiple owners.
Yeah.
Right. So who's curating for whom and how that works.
I think of 4th Street, Berkeley,
Right.
and Danny Abrams, the ultimate
Right, yeah,
retail
exactly.
space. If
But
you
I
haven't
think-
been up there, check it out.
There's nothing unique. There's not always the thoughtful process. All of that is absolutely spot on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
For a really pretty good. I said for somebody who knows nothing about
Well,
retail, you
fortunately, I have a spouse that looks after me.
wanted to
Robin.
also further explore this concept of over retailed and just the mix of businesses and just that word in general. So when you're saying retail, are you speaking of things that you can buy only? And
Right.
are you including
Right.
like I'd be curious to know
Right.
what all you're including there. And
Right.
then downtown does have, very unique retail shops that are
Right.
there,
Right.
but they are scattered in between vacancies.
That's
and
right.
around the corner
That's
and
right.
all of that kind of
That's
stuff. So I
right.
think that there's a lot of interesting things to dive deeper into. And I'm curious if we
Right.
will be able to get your presentation so that we
Yes.
can further.
Yes,
get into the
absolutely.
data.
You're right. Tess, the presentation's already been posted, right? Or it has, or it will be.
It will be posted after this meeting.
Yeah.
Great. And then lastly, is that number of the retail focus that you were talking about, that 200 and some number there, that was just State Street, correct? So
Correct.
That's not.
Just State Street, not the side streets.
Got it. Thank
Right.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Let's go to Ed, and then after we'll go to online. So we don't want to always make you the last in the queue. So go ahead, Ed.
No, we're going to do
Oh,
Ed.
no,
and
go
then
Ed
the one
now, and then
online, and we'll make Nadra be last.
next.
Nadra.
A lot of what you are reciting is stuff we already know, unfortunately.
Right.
I'm hoping we get more meat
Right.
next time, but
Right.
things kind of, were obvious to me, and I hope they were to others as well, that your comment that State Street is home to older retail than other cities. What does that tell us? We got no turnover. We're not growing. And the other thing was that vacancies on State are back to where they were pre-pandemic, which means it was pretty bad then, wasn't it?
Correct. That's
Pretty
exactly
bad
right.
pre-pandemic.
That's right.
So
Yeah. So
I hope that when MIG gets through, that they're going to tell us how to bring more retail and business to State Street.
Right.
Hope that
Yeah.
Maybe you'll drag the retail with you when you come back.
We'll do it. Okay. Is it Roxana? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. In an effort to preserve time, I just want to say I agree with so many of the comments that were made, and I don't want to repeat any of them. So I'm going to introduce a thought that we haven't heard yet. So aside from all the things that have been listed, I want to talk about the importance of outdoor space and the development of a city center feel, not just because of retail and economy, but really the experience of entering this future space, whether it's a promenade or a city center, and really focusing on the experiences, the outdoor experiences. And I want to say, when we talk about that, obviously there's two things. What experiences are you introducing, like activities, art, and so on? And what does that look like when there is no activity? Where is that city center? Is it a plaza? Is there a very clear entry point? Is there a sign or a fountain or something? So those types of resting elements that act on their own when people are not there. I think that is such a big, important definition of outdoor space, urban space. And I know that it's probably in your plan, but we haven't really talked too deeply about it, and it might be a later topic. But I really think that is such an important part of master planning, is that experience that is permanent. And I just want to add that to the mix. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Megan, she is, we'll get her. Okay. Nadra, why don't you go in the meantime?
Thank you. So I don't really have much to add. I just, I really agree with other committee members, but just really exploring more this idea of the retail, the office, and then also the housing mix and downtown and State Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. I think with that, we're probably ready to move on to the next topic area. Thank you very much, Dina. There's a lot more follow-up, obviously, more work to be done. That's what we were expecting. Okay, so mobility, multimodal access, Cool.
So this is the easiest topic, as we all know, is the multimodal. No, so to restate, we have Miguel also virtually from Fair and Pierce to help answer. And we have just started to map. A lot of it will be very obvious to us all, but for us, it's always good to start putting those layers and then one layer on top of the other layer as we start to think of what are the challenges, but then also what could be the opportunities. So you begin to see what is the transportation network as the city decides it in terms of, the red being the other principal arterial, and then yellow being the minor arterial. Let's just say it was the minor arterial on State Street about 3 years ago, and it's no longer the minor arterial anymore. So things change, right? Then this is just trying to understand. As designers and looking at solutions of how we improve our public right-of-way, we sometimes do a quick analysis. How much of our space is actually allocated to different types of modes of travel? So if we just look at our east-west streets, and this is a quick and dirty number crunching that we have done, about 60% is devoted to cars, 35% to parking, 5% to bike. But as we start to go to, hey, what about the parallel streets to State, Anacapa or Chapala? The colors that are indicated by the orange for the cars and then blue for the pedestrians, with 13 being more for in between the cars, it's for parking. You begin to see how much land is devoted. As a general rule of thumb, it's very general, I encourage you to read the Great Streets book. If you want a good street, forget a great street, at least 50% of it should be devoted to not moving cars. That's the general thumb rule for any good street to be something that you would not focus on mobility, but as a destination. So these are very, very broad numbers. And then, of course, what was State Street before? How much was it devoted to cars? How much was it devoted pre-COVID? You can begin to see about 50% bikes, 17%, 33%. Right now, we mesh the ped and the bike together. The things are changing, things are fluid. But just to give you an idea, there is a dramatic shift. And whether you feel it or not, that's really good to keep in mind as to moving in the right direction to create a great street. Here's the vehicular daily traffic counts. This is pre-COVID. It's actually 2017 data. Please take it with a pinch of salt. This is work in progress. We're still getting data. But if I just look, for example, at Chapala, which is like 3 to 4 to 5, sometimes 5 lanes with turning movements, one-way streets, it carries about 20,000 ADTs. That is average daily trips traffic. About on a one-way street, a lane can take about 8 to 10,000 cars. So there is an opportunity to think about, hey, is Chapala lot towards cars? Is there an opportunity to repurpose, for example, Chapala to something else? We heard it at the HLC meeting, at HLC PC meeting. Is there an opportunity to look at Chapala as an opportunity to make it something better? If nothing else, not just for cars as the primary reason to travel on. Anacapa, on the other side, is also in some blocks having 20,000 ADTs, but it's more like 2 lanes and then sometimes a turn lane in the middle. So it's in the right spot in terms of, if I just look at Carlson, no other modes of travel, which is not the right way to look at streets, but it's just, again, number crunching that Fair and Pierce is looking at, and we'll come up with more detailed analysis as we go. We wanted to hear your initial thoughts on it. Bicycle facilities. As we are thinking of in the long term, what is the best bicycle facility on State, on the cross streets, Anacapa, Chapala, all our streets in our project area? It's always also to keep in mind, what is the network? You can't just have one street which has the greatest bike facility on it. It has to serve within a larger network. How do people come to State? How do they go from State? Yes, State has a lot of destination, but that's just something to keep in mind, the larger framework of bike network that is important to create a great downtown. You all are familiar with these photos. You know, there's not one bicycle user, one type of bicycle user. As I've gone, every time I go, yes, they're recreational bicyclists, commuters, kids learning to bike on State, teenagers at night, they all are part of the thing. And then I still see people biking on the sidewalks. We all struggle with the bike-ped conflicts within the road, but I have to be honest, I saw a huge number of conflicts happening. So just because you give a space to someone to use, please keep in mind, if it's not designed well, it's not necessarily what they will use it. It has to be designed to encourage that behavior to happen to what you're designing for. And that is something that we'll have to keep in mind. And Fair and Pierce is looking at, hey, what are the speeds? So it's not just, oh, let's put this kind of a bike improvement on this street. No, there are so many factors you have to keep in mind. What is the volume? What is the speed? What is the type of user you want to see on State or Chapala or Anacapa? cross streets, zero blocks. It all has to play as one solution as opposed to one particular solution on state. It has to work with the whole network to make it a successful thing. And that's what I think so is going to be a deeper dive as we start to look at areas. The city supplied us with great data about the Vision Zero analysis. This is, of course, pre-COVID, but you can see state is a lot in red. The heat map is showing that. So there were a lot of injuries, collisions, however you want to define it, that were happening. And then Miguel and the Ferrin peers started to look at the SWITR data. This is very approximate data, which begins to show pre-COVID for about 20 months, what were the kind of collisions or injuries happening just on state, right? And then these are showing you different types of injuries. But on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is if you collate it all together, forget the kind, and they're going to go into detailed analysis. Is it a paired collision? Is it a bike collision? What kind of collision it is? But this is just initial analysis telling you pre-COVID, and then with the closure, there is a change. And
that graph, was that a day for a month or two, a
for
year?
20 months.
20 months. Each are 20 months.
Yes, and so those are the 20 months we are looking at.
What's the definition of post-COVID?
Well, President Biden said COVID is over, so I'm just no. So no, I wouldn't say it post-COVID. Think of it before COVID, like more 2017, 2018, and then when the street
start
closure.
of COVID. Got it. April 2019.
Yes,
got it.
correct. And so if I just do a number crunching and I don't do anything else, these are the numbers to keep in mind: the number of crashes, total number of crashes in the period before the closure of state. Yes. Post 2020, sorry, it's 2020. Good catch. You'll change that, but it begins to half. And it also begins to make a change in terms of the type of injuries, the pedestrian crashes, bicycle. The key thing to keep in mind is for different modes of travel, no matter if you're walking or biking, the street closure has created a very clear benefit that we should keep in mind. And that is not to minimize all the conflicts that are happening on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis. And, you know, the people who are walking, they're not just walking, they're walking with their families, with strollers. It's all type of pedestrians, family members, people going to their work. And it's contested not just at the mid-block crosswalks or at the intersections, it's happening all over the thing. So that is the reality, but that is, just so you all know, this is a complex job. It's not easy, but that is all that we have to keep in mind as we think about what are the different things to keep in mind. And Ferrin Peers is also mapping, you know, all the intersections, but also looking at in the middle of the mid-block crosswalks as well as the intersections. The other key mobility, of course, is transit. In general, this area is very well served. I mean, look at the number of service lines. Of course, not on state because it's closed, but within a block or two, there are a huge number of north, south, east, west transit facilities, right? With the transit center also being there. We heard a lot about how there was a shuttle before the street was closed. Some people talk about it fondly. Others also talk about how it was really very difficult to maintain, and economically, it was not very sustainable to operate. But on the flip side, I think the key thing to keep in mind is if we start to think, because there's still a need and a desire to have some sort of a shuttle, but is it a traditional transit service that is reintroduced? Or is it more, what are the new trends that other cities such as Santa Monica or Culver City is looking, which is not a fixed route shuttle service, but it's shuttle on demand. It's not the Uber, but it is providing the amenity, and it is really creating, and this is what more and more downtowns on both the East and the West Coast are really looking at as a solution, as opposed to going with traditional fixed route transit to serve areas such as state. Miguel will talk more about our parking, because that's a key part of our scope. But to just to start to give you some initial findings, there is highest parking occupancy around midday, a bump in the early evening. There are certain parking lots that are working better, and then others, for example, lots 11 and 12 are often over capacity. And how do they operate over a period of time? This will give us a sense of how are people moving. Please keep in mind that we are going to be doing an analysis with the survey where people will tell us how they would like to move. And you'll see more about it as you see more of the final analysis coming out on just what the parking lots are, but they're also keeping in mind what could be the potential opportunities where people have said, for example, they want the street to work where it allows for different modes of travel. For example, people have talked about they wanting to see maybe a slow street in certain blocks, having a more pedestrian first environment clearly as major great streets have, but the ability to change its character and its use depending on the time of the day, as well as the time of the season too. And with that discussion.
Okay. Once again, another tranche of information here. We'll start with our online participants, and we'll go around the horn in terms of the mobility and transportation. We also have Miguel Nunez from Fair and Peers to provide answers to questions that might pop up here along the way. So let's start with the online participants. Is it Roxana? Go ahead. Why don't you start us off? Any comments, any questions? Okay. Not hearing from Roxana just yet. Nadra, why don't we go this way?
The idea of biking is hugely important for this area. I think in terms of the outreach that are the information that we've received from the community, just I would say at least 80 to 90% of it has been solely on biking, whether in favor or against alone. So this idea of a biking design, it really the deep dive is really important, and we really have to get that right and how we approach this.
Absolutely.
Also what was really interesting is the idea of the safety that has increased, and if there's any way that we can communicate that to the public in real time, because people only know their own experience. But if we're able to share that in the process, I think that might help alleviate some of the dissent possibly that we're feeling right now. And then the last thing was I really am interested in that electric shuttle alternate of like how we can get people commuting through State Street while maybe not opening it to cars, but having that alternative. So
that's very good. And on that last point, it's referred to in the industry as micro transit, basically emulating Uber and Lyft, only it's public transit service provided, and it's taking hold in a lot of cities across California. But it's interesting, the travel data, the collision data, it's counterintuitive. We might have expected it to be worse, but the data says it's actually less than it was pre-closure for whatever reason. Okay, Ed, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I do. The several times today we've heard about bicycle traffic being important to retail. And I would like to know, as you analyze the importance of bikes to retail, how many bikes are parked right now on State Street? I mean, if you were to go down there and say, well, there's 100 bikes parked, those people are all in the retail stores or in the restaurants, that's one thing. If you drive down there and say, we didn't find any bikes parked, that'd be a different story. So I'm not sure that I understand that there is a real valid connection between people who are biking on State Street, going 30 miles an hour, and retail.
Okay, we need to investigate that. Go ahead.
Percentage reduction in the accidents during COVID. I wasn't able to absorb all those numbers. I saw that it was less, but I was curious if you had a percentage there. And then also just exploring the different types of bike parking that could be available, because I think he's right that there's only so much bike parking available. And I have heard from our community that they would like to park in more safe areas and make sure that that's a part of the consideration process.
So quick follow-up on that, McCool.
Just in terms of crashes, total number, it went from 24 to 12. And then it goes, comparatively, if you go into different categories too.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Roger?
Disclaimer that I am not a bicyclist, nor do I own a bicycle. But I do walk State Street on a daily basis consistently. And what I have been watching is that pedestrians don't know how to use State Street. People are staying to the sidewalks. When they venture in the middle, they stop to take selfies, and bicyclists are coming. They're not aware of their surroundings.
Right.
So my 2 cents is that people need to be educated how to use State Street if it's going to be closed.
And if it's a shared street in particular.
Because they feel like they own it, and they just barge in the middle of the pedestrian without looking to see if their surroundings on bicycles.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But I have watched more pedestrian bad behavior than bicycle bad behavior.
Interesting. Okay, good. We'll study that in more depth, Diane.
I've seen the opposite, but okay. I'm a walker. So I was kind of interested in the accident data as well. And I saw it, and it's half, but that's reported accidents, right? Yes. So how many accidents aren't reported? I think it's like roundabouts. The severity of the accident is going to be a lot less, but usually the accident rates go up a little bit. So anyway, I'm just curious about that.
Worth probing that data set some more. Okay, Dave? Actually, Las Ramblas in Barcelona, it has traffic on both sides, even though its promenade is the feature and it's right down the middle. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, that's true. Bicycles.
Bicycles also is a language thing for me. And I'll just say that e-bikes that can go 35 miles an hour are not bicycles, they're motorized vehicles. And our code and our language has not caught up with reality between what a bicycle is and what a motorized vehicle, because that's what it is. It can do those types of speeds. And then lastly, meet with Hillary, please, on transit. Because both from the idea of shuttles and microtransit, which we've studied and are actually implementing, we have a lot to say. So before you get too far out on that, spend some time with Hillary.
MTD.
Talk about circulator, talk about the history of the shuttle, talk about microtransit, talk about what the possibilities are. But she's a great resource, so use her.
That's a definite. Okay, thank you. Ken?
Well, my first comment is that Roger should get a bike. And come bike with me, Roger. It's fun. And I do have a bike. I bike all over, and I bike on State Street. But I'm just been realizing, talking to people and listening to this conversation, that this thing about it's bikes on State Street or not bikes on State Street is really we're missing, I think, the bigger question, which is we need to integrate really well bicycle traffic and downtown. And at the planning and HLC meeting, there was a great discussion about what is the role of Chapala Street? What is the role of Anacapa Street? how can we design this whole downtown space to integrate really well bicycles as well as pedestrians? But I think we miss a lot when we just talk about bikes on or bikes off.
We agree. Okay, we'll go around the table. We'll pick up Roxana too, but go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I was, like everyone, I was impressed with the stats on the accidents. And the other thing that I didn't see in there is I think our activity is actually up. So the safety is even more impressive per person. And I think Ken's point is so profound in the sense that I think it's so easy to be black and white as we look to solve problems. And sometimes we need to really pay attention to the subtle integration of things, which kind of brings me up to Nadra's point about being sensitive to the people that are complaining. As a housing developer, I take projects to commissions all the time. The only people that show up and complain are the ones that don't want housing. That's not our population. So what happens in these public forums when we give public access, you always hear from the negative. You know, and if we look at what we've been hit with on this committee, it's seldom positive. It's all about somebody's negative experience. So we got to be big picture and keep that in mind all the time.
Very good. Thank you, Peter. Suzanne?
I just wanted to piggyback on what Roger Durling was talking about. I think there is confusion about how bicyclists should behave and how pedestrians should behave. And you're right, everybody's guilty. And I think that's part of the design solution that we're going to propose, is to help, kind of define what the pedestrian area is, what the bike areas, what the transit areas are, and how they interface.
Essentially use design, as Nicole said, to provide the cues for that desired behavior, the appropriate behavior for safety, convenience, and access.
Right. And, painting a green line down the street, that's not really solving the problem. That was a temporary, attempt. But I can see Roger's point, how pedestrians sort of don't pay attention to bicyclists and vice versa. So anyway, design is an important element.
There's a street in Portland, Oregon, and we like to cite, in that street, there's bicycles, pedestrians, babies and strollers, parents, and light rail, all occupying the exact same space.
Yes.
And it all works because it's going very slow and everybody's constantly aware of their circumstances, the ultimate shared street. So it's possible to think in those terms.
I have personal ideas of wider sidewalks, narrower transit lanes in the middle. These are just,
yep.
But these are just ideas that we can all talk about.
Exactly. Design can play a key role here. Hillary.
Yeah, so design and engineering is everything. You can do it. It's kind of, it's complicated, but also it's kind of easy. And when you separate modes, it's safer for everyone. I just want to celebrate these safety data points. And I'm a big Vision Zero fan. And our city public works department has done an incredible job over the past, since that, Vision Zero was adopted, to really focus in. And that heat map, right? It was really hot on state, also because it was the most used thing. So what changed? There's not cars, right? If it's a secret, that's what causes the most devastating and common, traffic collisions. Sure, cross streets have cars for sure, but they're not on stage as much. So that's a huge win, and we can work through the rest. Dealing with bikes versus peds is way easier, and
Right.
So I'm excited about that. Also, perception versus reality, what you were saying, Nadra, we can show numbers, right?
Yeah.
If somebody had one bad experience, they're like, that place is so dangerous, I'll never walk there again, right? But also we're using data. That's how we're hopefully going to make decisions to a certain point. Transit, would be good to talk to the transit operator about the transit. Because there's all kinds of thoughts, but just want to make sure that we can talk about that, because something that I always go back to is access and not everybody can easily be a cyclist or pedestrian, or not everybody wants to all the time, right? A lot of us are multimodal, and we have all kinds of ways we want to get around, and everyone should be able to enjoy, you know, those that 2 block range in lots of different ways. So.
Right. Okay. Very good. And as we know, in the language of Vision Zero, there are no accidents. There are only injuries and collisions, because an accident implies that you don't have control over it. And the Vision Zero movement is about, no, we can control, and we can reduce significantly the incidences of fatalities or injuries as a result of good design, good protocols, and other kinds of mobility cues. Go ahead.
For me, good info, good discussion.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Mike?
Just as a couple of you said, how easy it is to paint something black and white, I think it's also eventually a threat if you allow a vocal minority keep pushing people to make a very black and white decision. If you want to see people crack, that's the situation you put them in. And I think it kind of goes back to communication, even though this is a 10-year process, but a long-term process, that there needs to be some feeding the beast as we go along, that talking points are put out on what's happening, what's coming, and you're not just allowing that to be handled on the second floor of City Hall ad hoc, on the fly kind of thing.
Sure.
But bicycles to me is one of the most primary issues to look like we're working and solving on right now, rather than waiting a year and a half.
Indeed.
And not be forced into a black and white decision.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Roxana, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I was busy taking notes, didn't realize that you may have passed me. But I wanted to just share one thought with regard to transit. I heard in the presentation that some of the assessment has demonstrated to the team that localized transit to downtown seems to be functional, and there seem to be a lot of lines, but I want to take us one step further. I want to look at a bigger view. Downtown Santa Barbara serves more than just the city of Santa Barbara. We have people from the ends of Goleta, what we call Nolita, we have Carpinteria, Montecito, coming in and sharing our downtown as their downtown. And we do not have necessarily the best transit reaching those external locations. And I think that the big picture of networking a successful public transportation network web is to reach those places to help promote less cars being driven in. There are people who live in Goleta, there are people who live in the outskirts at the edges that may not feel comfortable or able to drive in, that use our downtown, work in downtown daily. Right. And so I've always been a big advocate of, looking at our public transportation system. I personally want to share, I lived in Italy for over a decade and I never owned a car. And even when I lived in the next town over, the equivalent of Ventura, I lived 40 minutes away by train. I never owned a car. I never needed to, because there was enough of a network that I could get from a train to a bus to a local, tram. Now, I'm not saying we need all of that, but I do think that we want to start figuring out the puzzle of how do we draw more people in without the use of a vehicle. And
thanks, Roxana.
That could be a big part of our puzzle. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Excellent point. And then we go to Megan.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just, two things. I want to just echo what Councilmember Jordan said about the need to communicate this data widely and really have that be central in this conversation for all the reasons that he articulated. But that was actually going to be my main point. I think it's absolutely imperative that we ground people in the data and then have opportunity to further contextualize it. I think it was clear from what was said that more information is needed. And I think it is relevant how many quote unquote close calls there are, what a close call is, what that looks like. So I would just encourage us to keep digging in on the data. And it's extremely helpful as we go out into the community to really make sure that we're all speaking from the same page. And then the other point that I briefly wanted to just highlight that I really appreciated seeing and that I hope we can continue to foreground in the conversation about the relationship between bikes and peds is that it does become very black and white, but I loved that you had that chart with speed and different types of mobility. And I think for me, as we talk about what this can or should look like, that to me is a more important question. How do we navigate those differences than the question of like bikes or peds? I mean, to me, that's almost not relevant. And I wanted to just highlight that and say that I really hope that we can continue in that vein and very much appreciate that that was specifically called out, the gradations and how important it is that we figure out where we're going to fit on that chart. So
thank you, Megan, for highlighting that key point for sure. Okay, last section here, urban design. Makula is going to lead us through that.
And I'm going to try to breeze through what is my favorite section, but just respecting everyone's time. So starting with what people have told us is the historic character. Just look at the different historic sites, the districts we have. It is one of a kind. It is so beautiful. That's why everyone said one of the best things they like about this is the character of this place. Going into, different ages of the buildings and what the stories they begin to tell. And it's not just the architecture, but the ability for each building and the places to tell stories. And I also wanted to celebrate the fact, yes, there are stories about historic character of it, but then, talking to the stakeholders, talking about the Filipino community, the Chinese community, the Japanese community, it's a wonderful layered story that can be told all along the way. You have to humor me for just 30 seconds on my nerdiness of urban design, but look at the block structure of what you all know is State Street, but then compare it with how it starts to get broken by the Paseos. And now compare it to what I would say, starting with what is always called the most walkable city in the country, Portland. Boulder is close. San Francisco is also considered a very walkable city. And we are taking comparable downtowns. Compare it to Santa Barbara. Don't try to compare it too much with LA downtown, but compare it to Santa Monica. There is something very beautiful happening out here. Even though the block structure is about 460, sometimes it goes to 450, 470. It's not the 200, 220 or 320 by 220 of San Francisco. But because of the Paseos, it does create a wonderful character. And what I love even more about it, like this, you can see, is almost surgical with block alleys. We have a wonderful Paseo network that creates and breaks the monotony that you start to get if you just have a one regular rhythm. So that's something to be kept in mind as we design it. It cannot be designed for just one block and then you copy it for the rest. We'll have to customize it. And then more importantly, to celebrate it. That's another thing, that don't think as we are thinking of State or any other cross streets, it's one linear experience. No, it's going and then turning left, then going another 50 feet, then going right. That is the character that has to be thought about, not just for mobility, but other users too. This is Figure Ground. I usually have a test for the audience. I won't ask you guys, but Figure Ground really shows us what's happening on the ground. And look at the beautiful fine grain, what we call it. Fine grain is something a human mind does appreciate. And one of the reasons also they appreciate, we started to map every door on every block. You won't get this in San Francisco. You won't get it in Portland. You won't get it anywhere else. So I know it's very painful and it's a development constraint in terms of the narrow lots, but this beauty of the fine grain character can never be emulated. What you have right now is something very beautiful. What is very painful as a designer to keep in mind that on an average, there are about 20 to 25 doors to take care of in every block. That is intense. And that's something that has to be kept in mind too. And the doors may change. Some may close, others may open. So think about the temporality and the flexibility that is going to be so crucial to any design in this area. And then, of course, multi-story buildings. It's not just one single 2-story buildings. There is wonderful interest that you get as you go all along the corridor. We did get land use maps and zoning maps, and we said it is not making sense for this project. And we said, what does it look on the ground? What is the experience? That is the experience. Even if I don't explain to you what are the different colors, that is just crazy collage of colors. That is something that cannot be emulated. I do clearly hear it's a development constraint in terms of the narrow lots, narrow parcels. But like Dina said, the place is the new anchor. This is why the place is a new anchor. Even if the black that you see are the vacant buildings, you still have a fair bit of other uses to keep in mind. Parklets, we started to map where the parklets are, and they go on changing every few months. It's very difficult to map stuff on this corridor. I was like, can we just stay as is for the next 6 months, please? But no, but you begin to see where are the empty areas. It's not just in the building ground floor uses, it's also how people are reacting to it. What is there to engage? If that's the life a parklet brings to the table, and it brings more life, what we again heard from the community, just make it street for strolling. And the number thing that attracts people is more people when they see more people, right? When they say more people, but we have to also be honest, and we heard it more and more, for example, at the HLC and PC meeting. If I saw the beautiful San Marcos building, I don't see it. So it gives with one hand, it takes some away. That's what a parklet is, we clearly heard it's doing. And that's what it's happening, where the beauty and the character of state is a double-edged sword with regards to parklets. And that's something we'll have to keep in mind. And then this is the pastiche of everything together. So if we just now then focus on ground floor building activation. So we heard a lot of desire, hey, design it for different times of the day, evening, night, morning, afternoon, weekend, weeknight. So we tried to understand, what does it actually mean? So that's usually when buildings are active during most of 5 days of the week, right? That's what it begins to take away on weekends. It's small, but you begin to see if banks start to close at important anchor corner locations, that energy is going away. There's no reason. I actually didn't see a lot of people in the banks when I went in, but that's a totally different thing. But the key thing to keep in mind is there are gaps. When people say there's not enough happening in the middle blocks, it's even more what happens in the evening. This is where people are saying, this is working great. What? Nothing much is happening. But then this is working a little better too. That is the rationale that people are actually saying anecdotally that we have tried to capture in a quantifiable way. The other thing to keep in mind is, I have to be honest. Yes, we have a lot of bars out here, but the nail spa is also open. The pizza shop is still open till 2 o'clock at night. The corner market liquor store is open till 2 o'clock at night. So when people are seeing one side of activity, they're building on the synergy of what is the majority activity and building on it. And so that is where, keeping in mind, are we over retailed? That Dina's asked the question at the very beginning. And this is not a problem that is just unique to Santa Barbara or State Street. Then the opportunity then would be, what can you do when it is not happening? A lot of people, Roxanne and others, talked about activities, art, what it brings, memories, smiles to children, to families. There's a whole right of way that is underutilized, for example, in the middle blocks, that can be totally used for 20,000 different things that is not being used in what are the inactive middle blocks. And that is something that other cities are trying. So the question is, yes, as we bring a successful, more retail, next time we come from the Bay Area, Ed, there may be just an opportunity to look at the public right of way and the real estate that exists right now in the roadway to use that better. And not, and make sure if you do a tango with someone special, you remember it all your life. And that is the beauty of activation, which is what we are going to talk a lot with the community when we go. These vacant spaces, yes, they have a detrimental effect. And I have to say, I have seen activities happening. I've seen it at 2 o'clock in the morning and then right in the middle of the day. And it changes, right? What was closed 6 months ago now has something going on. There is still a development synergy that I do want to appreciate. We begin to see. So based on Dina's analysis, there is something still good going on State Street that is attracting all the people. The last thing on the urban design for us to keep in mind, we always keep in mind is the canopy of trees, because they do provide the softness as a complement to the built environment. And if you actually begin to see, again, it's a double-edged sword. Some are just beautiful areas. Some are just walls. I have no idea what's going on behind. And the people who are walking have no idea what's going in the middle of the road. And so that is something we have heard again and again for us to keep in mind. I'm going to quickly breeze through infrastructure. It's something nobody likes to hear about, but I'm just going to show. Look at all the utilities that exist. I'm not going to explain it's an 8-inch line or a 4-inch line. Just look at it. Water, sewer, signals, fiber optic, stormwater. Didn't see a lot of stormwater. You saw a lot of sewer. You saw a lot of other things. But that is actually part of the challenge, is that we have very limited stormwater. Is that an opportunity, keeping in mind we do have mandates that we have to keep into account for both meeting our regional requirements, but also the state mandates. And a lot of cities are actually doing that to create a unique identity as they leverage new private investment. And that is something for you all to claim when you go back home. Is something to keep in mind. It's not just designing above ground. We have to keep into account there's a ton of underground too.
Okay, utility dreams. There we go. We have one more round of comment and then the big picture comment at the end, as we always do. So why don't we go around this way quickly, given the fact we're running out of time, we want to make sure we get everybody in, including members of the public who are not on the committee. Kristen or Mike? Nothing? Okay, Hillary?
I appreciate it, Nicole, how you appreciate the Paseos, and it's something that is really unique to our town. And so I think ways of, if you lived here for a long time, you know where they are. If you don't, maybe you don't. And so I know some of them like to stay more private, but I think that's something definitely to highlight and capitalize on.
There's something about the discovery of those. If you're not from here, you go, wow, look at this. It's exciting when you visit a new city and you find these new adventures. Suzanne?
Yes, I definitely agree that paseos are very important to Santa Barbara. And I had a question, and I don't know if this is the time to bring it up, but, and I think Tess alluded to it in the beginning about launching the new website and public engagement opportunities. Are you going to talk more about that later? Okay, so I'll pass.
Yep, okay.
Okay, so,
right.
yeah.
Peter?
My only question was the charts on activization. What was the source of that data? Yeah, you're showing the graphs of the activities
Were
at
the
night
yellow-
and day and night. What?
So it's not 100%. Oh, yes. Thank you. It's not 100% accurate just because of how much time it would take to go and check the hours for each 250 storefront. So it's an approximate that we've gone through one round of testing. So based upon a land use. So for example, open buildings for evenings are all eateries, bars and restaurants, theaters. So then we went and we cross-checked those for hours to make sure that these ones are still open. And then there still might be some additional ones to be added for if it's a retailer like a clothing store that stays open later. It's more of the anomaly than the trend. So this is more the trend.
So basically hours of operation, but to be refined. Okay. All right. Ken? Dave?
Storm drain thing. You didn't show State Street as a storm drain because State Street is, I think, a storm.
Okay. Diane. Roger. You're not an urban design? No, you're, okay. Just following the trend there. Okay, go ahead.
I'm so intrigued by the diversity of the ways that you put all of that information together and did it so quickly. I can't wait to dive deeper into the slides. I just wanted to share really briefly that we are doing a ground floor activation in terms of what Nicole was sharing this evening. And we've been taking in a lot of the community's input in terms of what they'd like to see on the street. And so join us after this from 5 to 8 for a Harvest Fest on the 700 and 800 blocks, which are our least activated, and to activate the heck out of them in the coming months.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good information. All right. Ed, anything? Nadra. Your mic, sorry. There you go. You're on.
I thought it was a fascinating just presentation in regards to what Robin was saying. And this may not make any sense, but I thought about when you showed the building use and all the different colors of the different types of buildings, that idea of like eat your colors, and like the idea of the different colors and how when you can diversify that, it will really amplify that experience. And it harkened to the idea of curating. How can we curate that experience using that diversity of the experience?
Yeah, I love that concept of curating in this context here. Okay, we're trying to finish up here quickly, Roxana.
Yes, thank you. Nicole, I just have to say, you're speaking my language. I got so excited when you started throwing away. I'm nerdy with you. The urban design terminology, the figure ground and the fine grained characteristics, I'm right there with you. I am so excited to hear that you're already looking at this, that you're deep in here. I can't wait to see what comes out of it. And I just want to just drop an idea and say, I hope you're exploring opportunities to develop new urban spaces with permanent elements as well, not just these temporary things that we can use the space for, but also the development of the future potential, whether it's going to be an entry point. I trust the direction you're taking us in, but maybe the two ends are an entry point into this promenade, into this experience. I'm hoping very much so to find some sort of center point, a heart to the city. I mean, all of it is the center and all of it's the heart. But when we think about really successful cities around the world, we think about, hey, I'll meet you in the center. Hey, I'll meet you at that point. People just know automatically what it is. We don't have that. I don't know if it's part of your vision, but I would love to see that explored. And I'm confident you've been pointed in the direction of the AIA charrettes that were done not once, but twice in the recent past. And there are some amazing ideas in there. Now, whether or not you select them, they might just be ways for you to be turned on to ideas. And I'd really love to encourage you to look at that. Those were charrettes that were done by volunteers, both professionals and just the average citizen of our community that put their thoughts onto paper, and we'd love to just make sure you get access to those.
We will indeed. Thank you very much, Roxana. And here we go. We're moving on to the next element. Oh, okay.
So we'll open it up for public comment. If any members of the public wish to speak. I don't see anyone in the room. Ryan, anyone online? Nope. Okay, we can close public comment and go into item B.
Yes.
Oh.
We are.
Dave, I'll go very fast, but I think so. People asked about what is the community engagement and outreach is going to be, and you all have homework to do, so I hope you all are taking notes. Number one, in the next 6 weeks, we are going to jumpstart into a huge amount of what we are saying is the overall visioning phase of this project, where we are going to go to the community at large within downtown, all around the city, to hear what they want to do. The key goals is to affirm the city council visioning principles, but also begin to generate ideas of what the community wants with regards to multimodal improvements, all modes of travel, but also different types of activities they would like to see. That you saw some of the ideas out here, and what time of the day and what block or what location. The duration, like I said, is 6 weeks. It will have a number of complementary concurrent activities happening to achieve that. The number one is there will be a bilingual survey online, as well as an in-person intercept surveys that will begin next week, November 1st. And they will be complemented by in-person events with 2 key windows being November 3rd and 4th, which will have visioning open houses, as well as the second week of December. I'm going to jump into the first one, which is the visioning survey, different types of events that will happen. And on November 3rd and 4th at 1230 State Street, within the storefront, we are going to be able to meet people, have one-on-one conversations, talk to them in groups, but we will also fan out into the larger project area to hear from them and go to the people as they're going about to different businesses, houses, work, so on and so forth. Please go and visit the website. It is beginning to have more location. We are requesting each and every one of you to sign up, and Tess will send in the sign-in sheet. We want you there, and we want you to bring 10 friends, maybe enemies, neighbors, people who have never come to downtown in the past few years, who should be here, who have never voiced their feedback. We definitely want to hear from them. In addition, through the rest of the 6 weeks, 2 days a week, there will be what is known as an Idea Lab, which is an opportunity late Tuesdays, concurrently with the farmers market, as well as Thursdays lunchtime. We want to hear from people and have these conversations. These are happening within the downtown area. And yes, again, we are requesting you all to be there. Please sign up. Maybe every second Tuesday works for us. Every first Thursday of the month works for you. Every and all participation is deeply welcome. Then the second big window will be within the December 9th and 10th, where we will share what we have heard in the first 4 weeks, 5 weeks of what the community has said. That is going to create the type of activities and the improvements they would like to see in different locations of the project area. And then all the designers or wannabe designers can put their design hats on and begin to design what the people want to see on stage. That is going to be an incredible level of effort. At the same time, it's going to be critical. Our local partner, Promotores, will be reaching out to make sure the Spanish-speaking community, we will be going to them at locations, having focus group meetings where they feel more comfortable to share their opinion. It may not necessarily be in a large design workshop, but we are working with them to customize so we hear from them at a place and a location and a time that works for them. And then complementing all of this would be the events that we would be having pop-up events staffed by the city and also by you all. We again would love your participation at these events, be it in parks, open spaces, different parts of downtown, but also look at your neighborhood events that are happening. We clearly heard we have to engage with the east side and the west side, but what are the other groups? You tell us, especially if you all have connections and can host us, the city staff and you all. We need you to help partner with these events, as this is going to be critical next 6 weeks to get a robust overall vision as well a palette of improvements that the community would like to see. And these are the other events that we will continue to do so in the next 6 weeks. So if you have plans with family, please think twice. No, I'm kidding.
I'm going to take it just so we can get through the end, and then we'll open it up for comments. So a lot of this Mukul already covered. So it is 1230A State Street we'll be at next week. That's the Old Beans Barbecue space, just in case you weren't familiar with the location. We do have flyers here for you all to take at the end of the meeting, and I hope you do, and I hope you give them to friends or others. Mukul went into this, so I won't go into it much other than just to say we will also be having virtual events to coincide with the November and December open house or workshop events that we'll have. We are also working right now on some activations for State Street. It's a little bit outside of the master plan process, but really trying to kind of pilot and test different ideas downtown. The reason I bring that up is because a number of them will have the State Street Master. We will be out there during the activation and engaging with community members on this process as well. So those dates up there are some dates that the library will be out on the on State Street on the 700 block of State tonight. I think, as you all know, because of the time change for our meeting, Timmy and I will also be at the event that the downtown organization is hosting to start to engage community members in this process. So I want to just quickly touch on the meeting schedule. I did send out a memo. At the moment, I think we can, I would like to move forward with the December 14th date. That's a Wednesday from 4 to 6 at the Faulkner Gallery. I do know that that date doesn't work for everybody, but I would like to move forward with that. We will have the following meeting dates are going to be in the months of February, April, June, August, October, and December. I have 3 different dates for each of the months. I did get some response back from some of the SSAC members that some of the dates that I sent out didn't work in your schedule. And so I will follow this meeting up with a doodle poll, and I will have that that info more finalized for the December date so we can identify a 2023 date. Just so all of you know, the dates that we are looking at are either the dates that I've already sent you or the Monday typically preceding that date or the Friday immediately following. So really close in time with that. And I will send all of those dates to you within the next few days. And just want to highlight where we started at the beginning of this meeting and where we are in the process right now. I know that everybody is really wanting to dive into the design concepts and to get into the details. So I want to highlight when we will do that. In December, we're gonna finish up what we're doing now, the emerging vision and goals. We're gonna talk about a lot of the outreach that we've done. We're gonna go into February and talk through the preferred urban design framework. February and April is really when we're gonna start to identify some preliminary design concepts that we'll share with this group, with the community, and then have a further discussion on various design concepts. And then in your meeting in June is when we're gonna be looking at more refined design concepts and starting to talk about implementation. In August is when we're gonna be looking at that preferred design concept. So what we're, strongly recommending, we hope, or what different elements we are hoping to move forward with. And then there'll be multiple opportunities, multiple drafts before we hit the end of this project. So October, there'll be, this group will be looking at a public draft that includes the design as well as the implementation. That will then go out for public review. We'll take comments in from members of the public and then bring it back for a final public draft review from the State Street Advisory Committee before it goes forward to council. So that, just to give you a little bit more, so if you definitely want to be here for certain, hopefully you want to be here for all of it, but these are the dates and where they're going to align with what we'll be doing. So before we go into public comment, does anyone have any questions about the community engagement? I did skip through, actually. I think there was a slide I thought earlier on just wanting to highlight, you've probably seen the brand throughout now, but also the website. I really want to credit Mr. Bolton, who's sitting next to me. He did just a tremendous amount of work over the last couple months to get this up and running. So this is a website specifically for this project. It is going to look similar to other city project sites, but a little bit different as well. And we've just launched it this week. There's a lot of information and data that'll be updated on there. So definitely check it out, statestreet.santabarbaraca.gov. Any questions?
Yeah.
It sounds like the survey is maybe the way we're going to try and engage people who don't come downtown because so is that a scientific survey? How's it going to be administered?
It's not a scientific survey. Oh, sorry. I have to say I've seen surveys done based on our past elections, and none of them were very true. But we are asking. The survey will be online and in person, so we will be in English and Spanish. So the links will be given. People can take it, and it's going to be very easy. But we are also trying to go to special events, for example, neighborhood meetings, school meetings, so on and so forth. So we would actually appreciate if you can push that survey out, the link out. Takes 10-15 minutes to do the survey, but it's going to be very important to make that happen.
But the difference is that it won't be a scientifically drawn sample, but we will have profile questions. So we'll be able to characterize the sample and compare the representation in the sample to the community demographics. So we'll be able to provide a commentary about that, but it won't be a randomized scientifically constructed or sample in the sense you described there.
But it's just going to be a survey that people are encouraged to take? Is it going to, how is it going to get out?
I can answer that, or start out at least. So there was a Google sheet that a lot of you went into and started identifying organizations and groups that we wanted to make sure we're targeting. So once it launches next week, and once we have the first public outreach event, we will start sending a short blurb as well as the survey link to all of the emails that we have for that. If you put your name next to it, we'll send you an email to let you know that we've sent it. My hope is that you would follow that up because likely you have a more personalized relationship, and rather than it just coming from Tess at the city, it can come from somebody that knows the person a bit better. So we'll start there. Timmy and I are also planning to be out in the community. We are going to be down on State Street twice a week from November to mid-December, likely the Tuesday and Thursday timeframe. But we are looking to be out in the community as well. So if you have, if there are organizations that have meetings or events, or it actually goes beyond that. There are, parks and places that a lot of locals will gather and congregate at on the weekends or other times of day. Timmy and I have started to create a list. I certainly would appreciate any help that this committee can provide in that regard. And because we truly do want to reach many people that aren't on State Street. I think that's super important. Gosh, what else?
City department notifications. I think we have talked to all the council members, the mayor, and we have requested them to push it out through their channels. And then I don't want to forget Promotores, because they're going to be leading through all their sister agencies that they have to reach out to that Spanish-speaking population, which is going to be critical.
It wouldn't be unrealistic to expect 1,000 to 2,000 responses at least. We've had good luck in the methods that we've described to reach those type of end values.
Are you going to be at First Thursday?
We are going to be at First Thursday. That is partly why we're on the 1200 block November 3rd, why we chose that location, and why we'll be there from 12 to 8 p.m. so we can get the First Thursday crowd.
Participating art galleries, so on and so forth. Handouts or whatever.
That's a great idea.
Is
Robert?
What about local media, radio, that type of thing? Are you able to place ads and or do PSAs, things of that nature to just get the widest berth as well?
I'm glad you brought that up, Robin. Yes, so we do need to look into radio ads. I have a very nice long list on a whiteboard in my office of all the places that we want to hit. If you go into the Independent though today, we do have both a digital ad and a print ad in the Independent, specifically targeted for the surveys and the open house events that'll be there next week. So I hope you pick it up and take a look. And then we've also reached out to some other news outlets. The Montecito Journal, I believe, has our ad as well right now, and then we'll be following up with others. I think radio is a great idea, and so we'll try to get there too.
So Tess, you mentioned, or in the presentation, there's a long list of all the different locations and outreach for the next 6 weeks. Is there a place where all of those locations and everything is land so that we can share that to other people in our network?
So I would answer that sort of yes and no. So there is the locations for where we will be when we're on State Street, when we're at the events in November. I'm hoping to secure a location sooner than later for the December workshop. For some of the other community events or places that we're going to target, I have a list of organizations and places right now. I don't necessarily have all of the times that they meet. So that's something Timmy and I are working on. Same with, I just take parks because that's something that I personally am at a lot. And that might be a time where, I'm taking a Friday or a Saturday and Timmy's taking another day during the week, and we're dividing and going to different places without much, without a ton of advance notice necessarily, just trying to get people in the space where they already are. So it'll be a mix of things.
For you to supply that information as you know, so that, or maybe emails, so that we can share that and put that out on any like social media that we have.
Absolutely.
Any email contacts that we can share with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Nadra. And that also, yes, we will. We've started social media accounts as well. So we'll be starting to post beginning next week on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Facebook. So if you use any of those platforms, once I get it out, I will send, once we really start to launch it, I'll send a note to the SSAC members. I hope you at least follow the account and then share things that we post.
Okay, I'm actually going to call it. I want to thank staff and the consultant for a really, really productive day. Public comment.
Any members of the public in the room that wish to speak? No? Okay. Any members online?
I want David to speak. Come on.
Oh.
There you go.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank the member of the public for coming. And those of you who can be there, we'll be out on State Street at 5 o'clock. Okay. Thank you all. Nice job.